Markel has, like, you're not out of pocket anything. Actually, you're making more money in year one. So why would we kick any more in? Am I reading that wrong, or?
We're going to receive funding from the state to cover whatever the assessment would be. And what we're saying is, what do you think the assessment is worth? So that when we get to year 4, get to year 5, and then beyond, that we know what the assessment will be from Hampden.
That's something you could estimate, Chief Farnsworth?
I mean, the only thing I can say is we know what the Westcom deal is. I don't know. I sit in a little bit of a different position, obviously, kind of being the police chief in Hampden, but a taxpayer in Wilbraham. Kind of sit at a little different situation where, I'm going to stop being politically correct and just speak what I need to speak. The bottom line is Westcom and Wilbraham can both do the job of dispatching us without an issue. Westcom has a deal on the table that will end with $100,000 payments for Hampden as the assessment rolls out. So that's what Hampden's looking at. When I look at the Wilbraham side of it as a taxpayer, I'm sitting here going, well, just by regionalization, wherever Hampden goes, $250,000 tracks with us to whatever municipality or entity takes us. So Wilbraham is going to receive over $200,000 a year by virtue of us being there, and the cost for you to assume that as a half-time position. So you're going to bring $250,000 into your operation, and then at the end of 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, as it scales down, Hampden chips in $100,000. You're still well ahead of the game. So, and I'll be completely honest, as a police chief and service chief for the town of Hampden, my number one goal is to make sure that our calls get dispatched, and both entities can do it. As a taxpayer in Wilbraham, I don't understand why you would walk away from $250,000 in payments every year coming from the state to reduce the tax burden. That's what I don't understand. There seems to be a disconnect here where, we're looking at buying a car. There's the same car sitting on 2 different lots. We know what the one price is, but now you're trying to get a price from the second one, and it's getting convoluted as far as I'm concerned. The state has the numbers out there, and they are what they are. One town's going to get a lot more money, the other town's going to get the service. I just don't understand the disconnect.
Well, we can also talk about the fact that Hampden's going to, rightfully, because of economies of scale, going to realize savings, which we should. And it needs to make sense for the taxpayers in Hampden as well. But we can't overlook the $400,000 that's going to come off the budget eventually in Hampden, right?
Well, but Westcom's not looking for any more of that money, so we can get the same service from Westcom without paying in that extra money. And by trying to get some extra money at a $400,000, now Wilbraham is going to lose over $200,000. Doesn't seem to make sense to me.
And
All I'm asking is
we're giving up the PSEP grant. That has to count against the 400, plus the unemployment, plus the potential for staffing, as our board has discussed, possibly staffing second shift for our population. So that 400,000 is a number that will never be realized. Like I say, we're our grant as well if we do this, right, Jeff? So that counts against that. Right.
So, Chief Farnsworth, nobody's walking away from anything. We're negotiating. So what I'm asking is for Hampden simply to just articulate, if that's what Hampden is saying, is that with the funding that Wilbraham would receive from the state and other grant funding potentially and probably, then if that's the case, then come year 4, come year 5 and beyond, if the figure for Hampden is that there wouldn't be any additional funding coming to the town of Wilbraham, from Hampden, then that's, to me, what you're saying is what you feel would be a fair offer. But I don't want to characterize it, but that's what we're just trying to get to.
Okay, Nick, I apologize. I misunderstood what you were asking. So I follow you now.
So what I'm
Bob.
hearing though, if Hampden joins your operation, the cost of your dispatch operation drops because now you get more state money coming in. And as Jeff said, your costs actually don't go up as much as the increase in state funding. Yes or no? In year one, I'm talking year one, and 2 and 3, I guess. You're going to realize more in state funding than your costs are going to go up. No? Yes. Just kind of a question.
John, what was your offer from Westcom?
I don't know. Jeff?
It's year 1 through 3 is 0. Year 4, no, yes, 0. Year 4 goes to 50,000, then it goes to 75,000, and then after that it's capped at 100,000. So it's a 50% reduction, 25% reduction, then the full assessment to the town is $100,000.
So can I just step in here for 1 second? What Chief Farnsworth is trying to say when he says 0, Westcom is still assessing Hampden at $100,000 per year. It's just the first 3 years, whether Hampden goes to Westcom or comes to Wilbraham, the first 3 years, whichever one, and whatever assessment is assessed, the state pays 100% of that assessment for the first 3 years. So if they go to Westcom for $100,000 or they come to Wilbraham for whatever we decide, the first 3 years, the state will pay that assessment. The 4th year is 50%, and then the 5th year is 25%. So I think that's what we're trying to figure out is what would the assessment be?
The only other difference.
Go back to the other question.
So,
I go back to my other question then. Your cost going up, and Jeff was saying you might be adding half a position. Say you're adding a full-time position. That person costs you, I don't know what a full-time costs in your budget, 120 for 24/7 or something like that. And that's, I guess, what we're talking about. Okay, your cost went up by this much, so we should be looking at covering those costs and maybe a little something over or something like that. I don't know. Is that where you're going with that, Nick?
Nick, can I just jump in here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. John, I think, as far, I also heard mention of the PSAP money. You'd lose that if you went with Westcom as well, right?
Right. So I mean, our savings aren't as great as what we're saying. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the best way for us to look at this is that we're a vendor and you're in need of a service. You have one vendor out there that's willing to do it for $100,000 a year. We're asking you to would like to do it with your neighbor. We're prepared to offer you at least as good a service, and I would contend far superior because of the nature of our two towns. We do get to work together. The people are intimately familiar with the roads and so on and so forth. And so what we're asking from you folks is what is that number? What are you willing to pay? Realizing that the state's going to pay the 100% of it for the first 3 years and then a scaled down version of it going forward. Okay. But I know I can't sell it to the other two selectmen that we're going to just do this for just the incentive, because that's what's in it for us. That's why it's an incentive. Okay. And your savings is your savings, whatever that is. That's not our business. Our business is to offer you a service that we feel more than willing and able to provide. And so we'd like to hear from you what you're willing to pay for that. Does that make sense?
It does. But I hear that number is much higher than 100,000. What I'm hearing is that you qualify for additional grant funding, plus you get our PSAP money. So instead of the 100,000, for instance, that you're saying that the state is going to give you, you're actually realizing that 100,000 plus additional grant money, your income could go up $250,000 by us joining. So not only do you get that 100, you get an additional close to 200 from the state. So there's the extra. There's the frosting on the cake.
Right.
But if you quantify that, and I understand your point, Bob, fine, let us see those numbers. Let's get a lockdown on it. And like you said, I can sell it when it shows that the town of Wilbraham is going to receive basically a profit by doing this above a cost, then that's the type of number you need. Am I right? Or you need some quantifiable.
Okay, but in terms of us coming back to you with what our costs are, that's not really part of the discussion at this point. That's our responsibility, is to cover those. What we want to know from you is, what are you willing to pay?
By the way, there's a couple of other costs that that everyone should be aware of. If Hampden builds Westcom, there's a $40,000 fee assessed right off the top. The other costs involve running fiber. If we were to join Westcom, Hampden would have to run fiber to the head end on Allen Street of East Long Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
That is $30,000. If we were to consolidate with Wilbraham, we'd have to run fiber right into the center of Wilbraham. And the estimate there is $170-some thousand, and there may be less than that. So those are other costs that are be thrown into the mix here. You know, as I think John said, we certainly any fee that would be assessed by Wilbraham for the additional cost that would be incurred by providing dispatch services would be paid by the state for 3 years. We were asked to put an offer on the table. It's hard for us to put something on the table if we're not aware of the increased cost that will be paid by the state, because we'll be looking at that cost in the 4th and 5th year where we don't get the full subsidy. So seems to me whatever additional costs that Wilbraham incurs are going to be covered by the fee, which is going to be paid by the state and sooner or later by the town. And then secondly, you're going to get an additional sum of money, up to maybe $250,000 from a so-called development grant from the Commonwealth. So, I mean, there's a significant gain there. If in fact, over and above that, the town is asking for some additional fee or some additional funding because Hampden is saving some money, I think that makes the deal, any kind of deal like that, significantly more expensive than it would be for a consolidation with Westcom.
Yeah, if we're looking at year one, and Bob, think of what you said. So you're saying year one, the state would cover the costs of the merger. Wilbraham would get our PSAP money, and I think Jeff threw that at around 50,000. Potentially another incentive grant from the state of 200 plus. So I go back to Bob Russell and say, okay, the first year, the extra money is $300,000, which is a pretty good sum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not being paid by Hampden, but you get that money for allowing Hampden to come in with no increase, and any extra costs are covered separately than that. The 300,000 is basically profit to your operation. We'd have to quantify what happens in 2, 3, 4, 5, but year one, if I'm reading it right, Bob Markle, that's kind of what you were talking about.
Okay.
But you know, like you said, yeah, what happens in 2, 3, 4, 5, and can we spell it out? But I would think an offer of 300,000 for year one in extra money to you, you know, and I go back to Jeff Farnsworth, I mean, I don't see how you turn that down. especially, you know, when any increase in costs are covered by the incentive grant.
Okay, well, we came here today to basically get your ideas on what you would be willing to pay for the service we're willing to provide. What I'm hearing is that you want us to make do with the support and incentive grant, and that the development grant money is subject to what the actual costs are. Is that's all that you want to spend? Is that how I would articulate that back to my colleagues?
Well, what I'm hearing, and Mary Ellen can chirp in any time, you're getting our 50,000 from our PSAP money, so we're
Yep.
giving that up. Any development grants that we would qualify for, we don't get anymore. They go to you instead. And as Jeff has said, year 4 and 5 have to be talked about because they drop off. You know, we have costs that are incurred if we join up with Westcon. Obviously, those costs have to be covered. We have to pay you instead. Where we would pay them, we pay you. And that's got to be in a deal as well.
Right.
And we have no assurance that the cost of extending fiber will be covered by the state. You know, over and above that, we have some other costs for merging and consolidating our systems. That's necessarily going to be covered by the state. Those are going to be expenses. And I think 2 other expenses that our selectmen have mentioned would be any the unemployment compensation that we have to pay out, which could be considerable. We have five and 5 dispatchers, so that could be a significant cost. Long and the short of it is, I think the town will have a significant gain in the 2nd and 3rd years, but in the first year, the startup costs will feed into that savings that we would realize.
It seems to me now that we've got some costs that we need to nail down a little bit tighter in terms of whose responsibility, for instance, on the fiber optic or what have you. So I think our next step might be to try and get a feel for what those exact costs are. And Anthony, do you have any idea of what it would take to get a hold of those, the state and find out whose responsibility is to tie in and what they may be able to do?
Just by going by the dispatch service data sheet that Hampden had when they were going to join Westcom, it looks like the cost for the new fiber line Hampden was going to be on the hook for. So I think that that would be the community that's going to join in, but don't quote me on that. I'll call or email state 911. And I just want to say too, I think we're having a disconnect here with the assessment. I think that's what Wilbraham was asking Hampden, you know, how much do you want to pay for it? I think they're asking about the assessment. How much do you think Wilbraham should assess Hampden for the service? I'm not talking about costs or anything. Mr. Russell and Nick, I think that's what you're trying to put across. Am I correct? And again, Westcom's still assessing Hampden at $100,000 a year up to $356,900. That's the operating budget, or 11.35% of the operating budget. If Westcom does not get any grants, Hampden would be on the hook for $356,900. So I think Westcom's still charging the town of Hampden $100,000, even though Hampden doesn't pay in the first 3 years. Westcom's still receiving that $100,000, but it's coming directly from the state. Hampden doesn't see any of that money at all. It goes right to Westcom. And also those grants that you're talking about, the incentive grants, those go to Westcom as well. So that would all go to Westcom, or it would come to Wilbraham. So I think that's where the disconnect that we're seeing is the $100,000, whether Hampden wants to pay Wilbraham $200,000 to take on the dispatch services, whether Hampden wants to pay $5,000. I think that's what is trying to be relayed. How much the assessment, what do you think your assessment should be? And Mr. Russell, Mr. Bro, if I'm wrong, just let me know.
I think you're right. It was a semantic thing, Bob, and I think where he's going there, okay, the assessment, you know, you're going to assess Hampden X number of dollars per year. The first 3 years, the state would help us cover that money. You know, you're going to say, here's a bill for $125,000 for dispatch services. And the first 3 years, that check will come either through Hampden or from the state. And the fourth year, the fifth year, that's when and Bob, you're going, look, I need to charge for the service. I don't care who pays for it. But my responsibility to the taxpayers of Wilbraham is to charge for stuff I'm giving away, or not giving away, I'm performing. If that's correct. And personally, I would have thought the town of Hampden would have been responsible for the fiber, in my opinion. So that's like it would have been back with East Long Meadow Jet back in the day. It was always our responsibility. I wonder, and Jeff helped me out with this a little earlier, why we can't piggyback on the fiber we already have. We have fiber connecting all the schools together going into Wilbraham. But I guess there's some data transmission thing or something else, maybe security. But we have fiber running through the towns already. The district paid a lot of money to connect all the schools.
Yeah, what I was told was we can't piggyback off the schools. The town won't let, or the school committee won't let the town piggyback off the schools for the fiber. That's what I was told. That's what I understand. I don't know if that's actually right or not. But the quote that I was given would be a dedicated fiber line from Wilbraham Police Headquarters to Hampden Police Headquarters, dedicated for us to use. And then, so we're able to add equipment if we want to do cameras in the future. It's stuff for the future.
For $175,000, I think our board's willing to have that conversation with the school. You know, we'll pick up the phone.
And we'll be on your side, John.
I mean, that's our equipment, right, Bob? You know, it's
Right.
if it's a school, it's so.
Right.
I understand security. You know, those high school kids could hack right in and get all the same data.
Right, but
Maybe the
well, again, let's nail down those costs. But that I think is a separate discussion aside from the assessment. And I think the assessment's the bigger issue right now. And if you guys could get back to us with some sort of a figure, and then then I'll bring it to my colleagues, and we'll go over it, and then we can get back together and we'll negotiate this.
Well, I guess my other question would be, and this goes back to Jeff, Tony, when you say the state will cover the assessment cost, if we came back to the state and said, okay, we're going to regionalize Wilbraham, and they're looking for, I'm going to use a round number for $100,000 to do this. And they say, okay, we agree with that. Or would they do some validation or something, or, checking type thing, or they would just agree with the number?
Chief, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I think if the number is relatively in line, with what's going on elsewhere with these centers, they're going to be okay with it. So it can't be anything that's outlandish. It has to be, within the median of what they're typically paying right now.
Okay.
So it would definitely have to be something that's reasonable.
Fair market
and
value.
they're not going to have an issue with it.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. Chief Farnsworth is correct. As long as, we're not asking for $1 million, I don't think they'll have a problem with what we come up with, as long as it's in the ballpark of what other dispatch centers are charging for an assessment.
I will put together some numbers and take it into the selectmen on Monday, the 31st. In my discussions with the 9/11 office, the message is very clear. I think Chief Farnsworth has said the same. If you're going to do something, do it sooner, because we've got money now and we're not sure how long the money's going to last. So we'll try and get a proposal back to you from our selectmen within a short period of time.
This is addressed to Bob Markle. Bob, I have your letter where you say the estimate for running into the high school is $100,000. And then you just said it's $175,000.
Yes.
Do you have a good estimate, or is that something maybe we should have our RT people go out and get?
The estimate that I had, the initial $100,000 came from Chief Farnsworth, and he said that came from the IT department at Wilbraham. The
Okay,
$179,000 estimate came in recently via email from Wilbraham. So I don't have a way to estimate that other than those are the numbers that we have received.
okay, I'm just gonna double check that's all. Thank you.
Are you all set?
Yes, I am.
You all,
So Hampden can sign up with Westcom for the 000 50 75 100 cap. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's what we're looking at.
okay, thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Yep.